Hello and welcome back Inside the Infiniverse, Part 4. If you have not listened to Parts 1 through 3, they are sequential. I am the author of Jonnie, Fazzoolie, and the Transfinite Reality Engine. These are annotations of the book. Part 4 here corresponds to episode 4, about halfway through the novel, page 206 of the first edition paperback. If you haven't read up to here, if you haven't listened up to this point, you might want to go back to the beginning. If you don't want to go back to the beginning, I think you'll have plenty of thrills and spills. Pick any page randomly and read. I wrote this to be the funnest novel ever. That, of course, is subjective, but the book is dense and, to me, loads of fun. And I'm trying to do the same with these concurrent commentaries. As I mentioned, we're on episode 4. Halfway through, and in the first half of the book, my intent was to set up not only this novel, but the beginning of the entire Lover's Guide to the Infiniverse series. So we have, to summarize, met our principal characters. We've met Alice. She is a mysterious, seemingly omniscient and omnipotent entity who is interfering with the lives of the characters in odd and beguiling ways. You've got Miss Penny Pitz, a Gen Z super-achieving female. In stark contrast, you have Jonnie Fazzoolie, who is a hyper underachieving Gen Z male. And there's some chemistry between these two in ways that frustrate and excite both of them. We've also met Professor Amaranth Casey Floyd. She is a non-binary, transgendered genius. She is a researcher in quantum teleportation whom Jonnie has hired to actually design and somehow develop the Transfinite Reality Engine to fulfill the bet that Jonnie has made with yet another principal character, Dr. Basine Felderhasen. She is a German former researcher whom Jonnie met at the science conference, who instilled within our hustler anti-hero the bizarre yet enticing idea to design and develop a machine that could jump between universes in the multiverse as Jonnie's latest and greatest and most desperate scam, because that's what our boy Jonnie does. He rips people off by exciting investors with new ideas, new inventions that he never develops, walking with the money. He figures this could be a doozy. And I've also created circumstances where our boy Jonnie here is up against the wall. He's been evicted from his multi-million-dollar Chicago penthouse. He has gone to Cancun, Mexico, to a casino to meet up with an expert hacker of the dark web who promised to help him break back into his crypto wallet within which lurks 555 Bitcoin that he had purchased for $5.55, but to which he can no longer gain access because our hero and moron forgot his passwords. Needless to say, the operation proves a bust. Jonnie nearly loses his mind, but simultaneously to realizing that he is absolutely bankrupt and destitute, he gets this wild idea of building a machine to jump universes, and he goes about trying to do exactly that when he returns to Chicago, thereby hiring Casey, and all, as we sense, to compete with Penny, who has rejected Jonnie's attempt from a PR vantage point to get on her Thrillionaires Under 30 list of society's top young inventors, extreme sports enthusiasts and exhibitionists, and social media influencers, of whom Jonnie Fazzoolie, at least as far as he's concerned, checks all the boxes. So halfway through the novel, we've got the rivalry between Jonnie and Penny, Jonnie building his crazy device, Penny launching this list as a marketing franchise extension of a major publishing house to prove herself after the implosion of her first and lucky gig at the crypto exchange. We've got Dr. Floyd, who finally gets an opportunity, at least in principle, to work on research that they consider would be relevant for inducing an actual crisis, bringing about paradigm shift, and truly advancing science. Dr. Floyd has been stymied to the point where she would even take up the offer from this obvious moron and hustler to at least break out of the academic researcher mold and do the kind of research that could really move science forward. Basine has been taken out of the mix, at least for a while, by being put into some kind of trance or hypnotic state by Alice, who appears at the tail end of a science demonstration on the creation of an artificial consciousness through the use of deterministic basic elements in the form of cellular automata, which, if we've been paying attention, is the perfect matching theme for how Alice herself came into being as a Boltzmann brain. Anyway, now that I more or less go over the plot, it sounds kind of complicated, but if you really dissect it, there's a solid through line that runs very clearly and in a linear form throughout the book to this point. It's chronological. It's mostly centered on Jonnie Fazzoolie. And I feel like I did my best to bring in all the elements of not only this book, but the entire Lover's Guide series, which is complexity arising in an emergent way from simplicity. And this has to do with everything from a conscious being, namely Alice, to the dynamic in relationships between people, to the plot itself, which is emerging out of what seem like random elements, but behind it all, we're increasingly getting the sense that this disembodied weird character called Alice is pulling a lot of the strings. So here we go into episode 4. This tails right off of Casey, Dr. Floyd, agreeing to join Jonnie in this insane hustle of creating a machine that could jump universes. And up to this point, I've been referring to this universe jumping machine as what the title suggests, the Transfinite reality engine. But it's important to note that that name has not emerged yet from the narrative. It's really just this abstract idea fostered by the bet between Jonnie and Basine that if he could build it, then he'll jump to a universe where she'll be waiting, and she agrees to go on a date with him. So once again, love, or at least sex, conquers all, or at least motivates our anti-hero here to ostensibly do the impossible. So the name of episode 4 is The Brand. Episode 3 was The Band, which had multiple meanings, as authors like to do. Most significantly, that of bringing the band together, Jonnie and Casey. And the brand is branding this thing, is giving this machine an identity and a plausible methodology for its creation. And that's what happens here. In parallel to the development of the machine, you've got Penny and her marketing franchise, of which this Thrillionaire Under 30 list is the principal driver, headed toward not only an announcement of the winners, but a spectacular event, multimedia, multisensory event in Las Vegas that she has been preparing for. So there you have the setup, and it begins with that wonderful Stephen Wright quote, so apropos for a multiverse, infiniverse kind of sci-fi book like this. You can't have everything. Where would you put it? The first section, boss-colored glasses, hints at the ascension of Penny running her own division of this publishing house, at least her own project. And this idea of glasses, of everyone seeing the world through their own filters, but literally glasses, which will help drive Penny's motivation and raw creativity and enthusiasm for this wild event that she's putting together. So it begins with Penny returning to her sister Jenny's apartment in New York City for the Friday night dinner. Astute readers will note that Penny has been ostracized from her sisters after basically accepting the invitation to the president's inauguration, hinting again at the New York upper middle class, mostly liberal sensibility, also illustrating how Penny is a pragmatist. She sees her job essentially at pleasing everyone. It's not about ideology, it's about emotion. But now that she's settled into her job, which was referred to her by Jenny, she's comfortably back where she never, in a sense, left, as the baby girl, younger sister of the family, chronically single, always that third wheel at dinner. Her older sisters having families, professional jobs, leaving Penny in their wake. But now Penny has recreated herself yet again, and the dynamic is ratcheted up a few notches. So what is left for Jonnie to do except for setting her up with a guy? She had previously set Jonnie up for a job. That's how Penny got the job at the publishing house. So now Jonnie makes a move to set Penny up with her next date. And Jonnie colludes with Lenny, her very simpatico, if a little bit submissive husband, exactly the kind of husband you would think that a go-getting woman like Jonnie would have. And they conspire together to toss out the names of the eligible bachelors who might fit the bill for a date with Penny to solve her next problem. Problem number one for a Gen Zer is that great career. And problem number two for women and men of every generation to find their Mr. or Mrs. or who knows what right. And what they do is they go through a few names here. And these names that I chose were not random. The names that they offer Penny to consider are Chris Browning, Daniel Goldhagen, and Saul Friedlander. And I have written a blog post and done a podcast on understanding the Holocaust. So these names were not picked at random. Suffice to say that Christopher Browning hypothesized that most who perpetrated the acts of genocide did so circumstantially. Daniel Goldhagen, another intellectual, was outraged by this point of view and wrote another book where he says the opposite. The Germans were traditionally conditioned to murder the Jews. And then you had the intellectual who fell kind of in between them, where he acknowledges the circumstance, understands the depth of anti-Semitism, not only in Germany, but throughout Europe and the world, but takes a much more pragmatic view, who is Mr. Friedlander. So the reason I did this was twofold. The one, I hate random names in novels and fiction, where the writer is just trying to think of a name and thinks of somebody cool. And a name is such a powerful, powerful instrument of fiction and art. And they're loaded with symbols. So you don't want them to be too literal to the point of being a cliche. And at the same time, you don't want them too random and ad hoc. So the author is just pulling it out of their ass and it's just filling space. Because a name can be so powerful. That's number one. So these names, again, are the academicians who have analyzed the Holocaust from three very different points of view. And the other reason I did this is as a harbinger of the Holocaust becoming a theme in The Lover's Guide to the Infiniverse. So that's a spoiler alert. But in the universe jumping, considering the many, many options, when the multiverse, in my case, the Infiniverse, is contemplated, then the idea is almost always brought up of tweaking history, tweaking the branching, the infinite branching of decision and circumstance in ways that could fix things, improve society, prevent catastrophes from happening. And I would assume that there's not a single historian around who would doubt that had Hitler, Adolf Hitler, been actually killed in the thousands of near misses that he endured on the front lines of World War I, that had Adolf Hitler not been able to ascend to rule Germany the way he did, the history of the world would have been very, very different. So if you believe in this multiverse stuff, where everything possible is somewhere realized, and again, I just tacitly assume that that is the case. In another Infiniverse segment, I talked about Max Tegmark's level 1 through 4 multiverses. So if I'm going full bore for the mathematical multiverse of level 4, it, in a sense, implicitly contains Everett's many worlds hypothesis of quantum mechanics, as well as this idea of eternal recurrence. So we happen to be in a universe where this Hitler guy was Hitler, and everything ensued from there. It was a major branching point of an individual who influenced so much during and after. Now, the reason I focus on this is multifold as well. It's interesting. I have a Jewish background, and my parents are Holocaust survivors. One reason I believe this book works and is really the book I've always wanted to write is because I connect so much with Fazzoolie. Fazzoolie is a funhouse mirrored distortion of many of my own weaknesses, excesses, goofiness, intense hysteria. And that relatability and that catharsis that I've created with this character, to me, helped the character write himself. For years and years, I've struggled with writing from my head. And I finally learned that good writing comes from the heart, and it comes from lived experience. And by combining all of the craft, best practices, and learnings of years and years and literally millions of words of writing, I think, I finally figured this out. So with that same spirit in mind, Fazzoolie works because he's me, and integrating a Holocaust theme, however ostensibly cliche and trite and overdone, I've already got a lot of it cooking for the later books. And there's going to be some interesting stuff there where I'm actually going to go into the experiences as I have heard them and know of them of my own family, especially my father, who had some riveting experiences from the war. This hits home for me. I had a very contentious relationship with my father, and he leaves me with this legacy which is both personal and historical. And I'm going to dive in there. So this is a nudge, nudge, wink, wink. It's a hello. Christopher Browning, Daniel Goldhagen, and Saul Friedlander are here as kind of a wink to the reader and to myself that we're going to go into that territory later in the book series. So that's where the names come from. That's a long little little side note, but I think it's significant and it illustrates how I've been thinking about the book, how I learned how to write. And you can probably tell I'm just excited about this stuff, so it's kind of cool. Now, Saul Friedlander is where we land for Penny's pick. I changed his first name, as I have changed most of the names in this book. There are legal problems or potential legal problems by citing people by name. So it's S-O-L, and maybe S-A-U-L Friedlander could sue my ass anyway. But I think this exposition here is intelligent enough and balanced enough that won't happen. And just as Jonnie Fazzoolie is a twisted expression and projection of me, this Saul Friedlander character really has nothing to do with his archetype. So that said, who is Saul Friedlander? Now, I've got this tension between Jonnie and Penny. And they love, hate each other. They're attracted and repulsed. And they're also highly competitive with each other. Jonnie felt severely dissed when Penny didn't include him in the list. And Penny, after feeling she wasted her time with Jonnie and feels ashamed by her attraction and her humiliation, albeit indirectly, after she interviewed this fool, is going to outdo him. Penny's franchise, Penny's list, the event in Vegas, is going to be all that much more spectacular to show up Jonnie and to show Jonnie that Penny's got it going on. And Jonnie, meanwhile, as we'll soon see, spoiler alert, well, this whole thing is one big spoiler alert if you haven't read it. And if you haven't read and are just listening, this is kind of fun, right? Anyway, Jonnie competing with Penny is like, screw your list. Screw your event. I'm going to build a machine that could jump universes. And even if it doesn't work, I'm going to sell it in for millions and walk with the cash. Good luck catching up to me. So, as a device, I, of course, needed a dude to drive Jonnie Fazzoolie nuts with jealousy. So if Jonnie Fazzoolie is a complete phony, a failed hustler, a bullshit inventor, someone who was smart enough to buy crypto in its infancy, but was dumb enough to lose his password, I need Jonnie's nemesis, one of Penny's suitors, to be the opposite. This guy is also an inventor, but he makes shit that works. He makes technology that's revolutionary. This guy bought crypto and he remembered his password. So he is loaded. He's an inventor. But I also need him to have his own kinks in the armor. I need his vulnerability to be self-evident so that they could be exploited. So he is older, and this really helps with this generational war that I've constructed. There's a battle between genders. There's a battle between classes. And now there's going to be a battle between generations too, because this Saul Friedlander guy is a boomer. He's a 60-ish kind of fellow, Remember, Penny is maybe at this point 27, 28. Fazzoolie is a little bit older than Penny, but still under 30. And this Friedlander guy is like late 50s, early 60s, literally double Penny's age. And that drives Jonnie even more crazy. And that's the setup. And I pull this through. And again, Penny is set up by her sister and her brother-in-law, just like Penny was set up with her job from her sister, her middle sister. And Penny, just to shut them down, agrees to go on a date with Saul. When she meets this guy, I also made Saul weird. And weird in a Fazzoolie-esque way. I had so much fun with this construct that became almost a real character. You don't really get to know Saul too much because he's kind of a tool, not just for Penny, but for me. But I had fun with him because he's got Fazzoolie-esque qualities. He's loud, he's brash, he's bombastic, he doesn't listen to her, he's highly opinionated. He thinks all the technology that's out there related to virtual reality and augmented reality, which it turns out is his specialty, is garbage. And what I've tapped into is one of the biggest trends, tech trends, which we are going through right now in 2025. Everyone's talking about AI, check. Robotics, check. But if you tune into the tech magazines and newspapers and blogs and podcasts, the cutting edge pundits, they're all talking about glasses. They're talking about augmented reality, virtual reality glasses. And by that, I mean new versions, advanced versions of what Google tried to do back, when was this? 2016, 17, Google Glass, almost 10 years ago. Ahead of its time, much like Apple's Newton was way ahead of itself. So ahead of itself that it bombed. But the idea is you put on a pair of glasses that could be adapted to any kind of glasses. It's got its own battery in there. It's got its own Wi-Fi hookup. And in your field of vision is a digital screen. So it blends your view of the world with a computer screen. And it does so in a manner that the digital is superimposed on your view of actual reality. Analog and digital worlds come together. Augmented reality. And it has virtual reality components in that it could be so immersive and entertaining that you are, in a sense, put into that digital world while you're still in the real world. So this guy Saul is an independently wealthy, brilliant inventor whose mission is to upstage all the major companies who are now investing heavily in this technology. And it's been notoriously difficult to do this, but Saul is doing it. And Penny, who is first just shaking her head that this old guy has got no sex appeal. He's annoying. He's rude. He's brash. He's yet another dating dud of endless dating duds in New York City for Penny Pitz. Her ears and eyes and all of her senses immediately perk up when this guy mentions that he builds this kind of technology. And the reason that Penny goes nuts is that she instantly connects the opportunity to enhancing and revitalizing her idea of what the award ceremony could be for her Thrillionaire list. She is giddy with excitement listening to this guy talk, so much so that she puts down her guard. She agrees to join him on their first date by going to Brooklyn, down deep into Brooklyn, into a part called Red Hook, where this guy has rented or owns a loft space where he's got an entire research facility diving deep into prototypes of these amazing AR glasses. And she tries one on and she is stunned. There's a vignette on page 2014. I'm projecting here into my mega saga on page 214, where she tries one on. They're built into a designer pair of fancy black sunglasses, which look great on Penny. And she gasps with the exploding sights, tactile experiences, the interactive video streaming across her field of vision. And then out loud, she unconsciously gasps, "Jonnie Fazzoolie, kiss my ass." And as she articulates that, instantly Fazzoulie's social media feeds pump into her field of vision, and she can't believe it. And here I do a neat juxtaposition. If this would be a movie, it would be so cool, where the arch nemesis of a guy like Saul is projected into the field of vision of this wonderful, sexy, young lady, Penny Pitz. And then Saul, ironically, asks her, "Do you likey? You likey this? Do you like it? Do you like what you're seeing?" And then Penny, still inundated by Fazzoolie, she says she likes it a lot. And it's confusing, it's schizophrenic. But when she says that, Saul responds by saying, "I like that you like that." And that elicits a hashtag, "oh my fucking God," number 4 for Penny Pitz, which is like, this old turd of a boomer who was so annoying and opinionated and weird is on a silver platter bringing her the most amazing technology she's ever seen so that she could ultimately upstage the bozo, the charlatan, yet the obsessive object of her affection and desire, who is simultaneously streaming through her magic sunglasses. And there we have the seed of Penny's relationship with Saul, who will turn out to be the arch nemesis of Jonnie, and the vehicle for Penny to put on the greatest show, multimedia, multisensory show. Now, as I describe that multimedia, multisensory show, astute readers will go back to two things. One, the live demo of the cellular automata, which evolved in real time to create an emergent consciousness, or at least precipitate the emergent consciousness that we know of, Alice, who hacks into the professor's demo. Exactly like, astute readers will be rewarded, Alice hacked into Creo Banzai's jar, the ultimate simulator. And there are technological, thematic, deep similarities between the spider's jar that can instantiate reality from a digital emergent program, and Alice hacking into Professor Fulcrum's cellular automata evolutionary cycle of emergent consciousness. Isn't that cool? So I'm tying all this together. I don't come out and yell at you. And again, if you don't notice any of it, it's no points against you. But this is the job of a good novelist, to tie all of these things together. You have Alice Void. She is a Boltzmann brain. She spontaneously evolved out of the random quantum foam of a dying universe. She is the same entity who then hacks into the dynamic demonstration of a very similar phenomena where random cellular automata over quadrillions of iterations in a computer using the most advanced NVIDIA chips and helped along by the latest artificial intelligent technology to, in a sense, guide the evolutionary process. She hacks into that. And Penny Pitz, our dear Penny Pitz, will put together a multimedia, multisensory event which analogously brings together all the random elements of digital human storytelling with a live audience to juxtapose the digital and the real worlds to create its own emergent phenomena of the Thrillionaires of her generation, bringing human stories to life in a way that hasn't been done before. And spoiler alert, Jonnie Fazzoolie ain't having it. So that's the setup here. That's the various elements of tension that come in and out of play. And then the narrative moves back to Jonnie and Casey. And Casey realizes that Fazzoulie's setup is bullshit. He's got nothing going on here. And what I do in the next few sections in episode 4 is to give a little backstory. I do some time jumps here. It shifts tense. I was conscientious about paying very close attention to how this was told so it's not confusing. But the essence is here. I give a little backstory on how Casey is a genius. She's really one of a kind. She's terrific at both engineering and theoretical stuff. She has this girlfriend from her past who haunts her. And she remembers her, and this girlfriend apparently empowered Casey to become her true self. Part of it was abandoning her gender, her traditional gender. This was very important to Casey. Let herself be the kind of person that she felt themselves to be. And I also describe and then get into two things. One is Fazzoulie's bullshit showroom of failed inventions, and there's a very humorous series of all of these gizmos and duds. And then I provide backstory and get into Casey's frustrations at the mythical University of Wisconsin at Hamilton, the culture there, the way that academic institution has been transformed with the recent presidential administration, both in terms of funding pressure, and pressure on someone of Casey's background and identity. And all of this swirls amid Jonnie trying to figure out what he's going to call this device and how the hell he's going to sell it in, given how wacky it is. It's way out there. And when you combine Jonnie's nanosecond attention span with the outrageous infeasibility of this device, Jonnie starts to come to the realization that he might have bitten off more than he can chew. But he sticks with it, just like Casey sticks with it. And they end up working together, locking elbows, if you will, to actually try and build this thing. But it's not easy. And in the midst of all of this, I have a few sections where, as kind of a humorous, cliched trope, I've got Jonnie Fazzoulie's ex-wife, Julie Fazzoolie, Sharon Marin, calling Jonnie at the most random and inopportune times throughout the entire Lover's Guide to the Infiniverse. And the reason that I think this character is important is to demonstrate that Jonnie Fazzoolie, although he seems to be this sex-crazed maniac, this guy who has no real human attachments, this hustler con man who just rips people off, takes advantage of every situation that he ever gets himself in, has a soft spot, has a sweet spot. He was once married. He had a relationship. He actually found himself in a traditional physical, sexual, emotional, monogamous, more or less, one would assume, relationship with a woman. And that's vitally important for the character in terms of vulnerabilities, giving him dimensionality, a potential arc for his development throughout the series. And it's incredibly important because Alice, who for her own insane reasons has picked him from all of reality, senses and knows that if she could crack that sliver of a heart in Jonnie, then she could actually get him. When we go back to what Basine told Jonnie of the chances of jumping universes, the probability is infinitesimally small, but non-zero, that Jonnie actually has a heart. So that gets the plot going. And episode 4 dives into the heart of Casey's dilemma. I introduce another character who seems to be incidental, but she will come back. The chairman of the physics department, Dr. Stavrida Gravos. I deliberately made her kind of a Harry Potter-esque figure. Large and in charge, kind of grotesque physically, and in terms of her character or personality or lack of it. And as I mentioned, she will be a useful mechanism for some shenanigans that ensue in the second book. And her real identity will be something surprising as well, as yet another spoiler alert. So anyway, we've got the tension on campus. Casey goes back up there to ostensibly steal research equipment. Jonnie's got no money. His office is a dump. It's full of his old shitty inventions. So in summary, Casey cleans out Jonnie's shitty showroom, makes room for herself in the office next door in Chicago, goes back to her campus, and does her best to steal as much research equipment as she can get her hands on to work with Jonnie to do what the campus won't allow her to do in terms of researching quantum teleportation. At least get that up and running. And shenanigans ensue. I introduce another character on campus whom is sympathetic to Casey, kind of likes Casey in that kind of way. Stanley Fields. I took his name from some of my older writing for a similar type of personality in a screenplay. And together, they facilitate Casey getting quantum research hardware and remote computer time for her to run her simulations so she can, even without Jonnie's help at this point, begin her research into this amazingly unlikely but potentially revolutionary universe jumping technology. And with that, we are roughly on page 273 of the novel. And I'll leave you here with part 4. And in part 5, I'll get into the epiphany that Jonnie has, what it could all mean for his mess of an existence. Hope you've been having fun, at least as much fun as I've been having bloviating. Going back through the novel and talking about it does wonders for me for kind of wrapping my head around my own kid, so to speak. And it also inspires me to finish book 2, which is in the works. I broke book 1. I broke 1 into 2 books, as my want. I always overwrite, so I need to push the narrative further. I did the same thing with the Super Santa project, which ballooned. And this one's ballooning too, but I'm pacing myself well, and I'm filling in details not as fluff, but as real foundational heavy lifting here for the series that I'm building up and into. What will become self-evident, perhaps retroactively, is that these first 2 books are really just the intro. The device, big spoiler alert, proves to work. Jonnie and friends are going to be zipping around the Infiniverse with amazing things happening. And we're not even near there yet. So I love this slow buildup. As I mentioned in a prior Infiniverse, I originally did not want to introduce the character of Alice at all until the crew enters the Infiniverse. But I felt that was a lost opportunity. And I'm very happy that I introduced Alice right out of the gate, because it set up the science fiction feel to this, when much of this, especially in the early book and books, is very earthy, right? It's real people in this world doing real things. And it builds tension, I think, between this fantastic world with evolved dinosaurs and sentient spiders and insane simulators and hyperdimensional warships, and this loser who was going broke and is in a desperate need to figure out a new way to rip people off. So I love the juxtaposition, as I mentioned before, and I think it's coming together well. And again, hearing myself bloviate, I get even more excited about finishing this second book, which is not complete yet, but getting there. And also recording the Audible book, the audio book for Audible and other platforms of this novel. As of this recording, I've completed half of it. I got through episode 3. It amounted to 33 podcasts of varying length, anywhere from about 10, 15 minutes to at most 25. And I I love doing that, and I think there would be a desire for the audio version. I still need to practice my accents if I want to go there. Thank you so much for listening. Part 5 will be coming soon.